Beneath the surface of Iran, especially deep inside its capital Tehran, an extraordinary panic is unfolding, one unlike anything seen in the last 40 years. For more than 48 hours, Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei has completely vanished from public view. Friday prayers have been canceled, high-level meetings suspended. Even senior state officials are reportedly unable to reach him. Intelligence circles suggest that Khamenei is no longer at his official residence and has likely been moved to a nuclear-reinforced bunker in the mountainous region north of Tehran. This disappearance is not simply about street protests. The Iranian regime has faced protests many times before. The real terror comes from something far more dangerous: isolation. For decades, Tehran relied on Moscow as its ultimate strategic lifeline. Russia was the partner that always answered the phone. But today, that phone is silent. Calls to the Kremlin go unanswered. No statements, no reassurance, no support. According to WarLogicX, this silence alone has shaken the Iranian leadership more than any protest ever could. Because when your strongest ally disappears at your weakest moment, the threat is no longer on the streets. It is existential. For years, Iran believed it was protected by an unbreakable alliance. Whenever pressure mounted, Moscow stood firmly behind Tehran, offering diplomatic cover, military cooperation, and strategic reassurance. That belief has now collapsed. Today, Russia is not just silent, it is deliberately absent. According to multiple intelligence-linked sources, Iran's leadership has made repeated attempts to contact the Kremlin, only to be met with delays, excuses, or complete non-responses. WarLogicX assesses this silence as a calculated decision, not an oversight. In geopolitics, unanswered calls often speak louder than public statements. This sudden withdrawal of support has sent shockwaves through Tehran's power structure. Street protests are manageable. Sanctions can be endured. But abandonment by a primary strategic partner is something entirely different. It forces a regime to confront a terrifying reality: it may be standing alone. Russia's silence suggests that Iran is no longer a priority, or worse, that it has become expendable. For a system built on external guarantees and deterrence, this moment marks a turning point. When allies disappear, regimes begin to fracture from within. And that fracture has already begun to show. What finally forced the Iranian regime into full panic was not the protests themselves, but the data it could not control. In early January, internal hospital systems and morgue records began to reveal numbers so shocking that authorities immediately moved to shut down internet access nationwide. According to multiple independent sources cited by international observers, deaths across Tehran and several major cities surged dramatically within just 48 hours. Official statements spoke of dozens. Internal databases told a very different story. When cases marked with unknown cause of death were included, the real toll climbed into the tens of thousands. WarLogicX emphasizes that such a concentration of civilian deaths in such a short time is almost unprecedented in the modern era. This was not the result of natural disaster or foreign invasion. It was the outcome of a state turning its weapons inward. The regime understood one thing clearly: once these numbers reached the outside world, the narrative would collapse. This is why the blackout happened. Not to restore order, but to bury evidence. As more details emerged from hospitals and forensic reports, a terrifying pattern became impossible to ignore. Medical staff quietly confirmed that the vast majority of bodies arriving at morgues showed gunshot wounds above the waist. Chest, neck, head. These were not accidental injuries, and they were not warning shots. WarLogicX stresses this point clearly. Security forces were not trying to disperse crowds. They were firing to kill. Crowd control doctrine normally targets legs or uses non-lethal force. What happened in Iran followed a completely different logic. Trained shooters, including snipers positioned at elevated points, reportedly focused on specific individuals within the crowds. Young protesters, women, people who appeared to be organizers or leaders. This was a calculated operation designed to decapitate resistance before it could organize. The message was brutal and deliberate. Participation equals death. Such tactics are not meant to restore order for a single night. They are meant to traumatize society for years. When a state crosses this line, it stops acting as a government and starts behaving like an occupying force against its own population. What followed the killings added a layer of cruelty that shocked even hardened observers. Families searching for missing relatives were sent from hospital to hospital, until many were finally directed to morgues on the outskirts of Tehran. There, instead of answers or dignity, they faced extortion. According to eyewitness accounts and leaked documents, the state demanded payment before releasing bodies for burial. The charge was coldly labeled an ammunition fee. In simple terms, grieving parents were forced to pay for the bullets that killed their own children. WarLogicX underlines that this was not about money. It was psychological warfare. The regime was sending a message to every household. Even in death, you are powerless. Mourning itself was turned into a controlled privilege. Funerals were monitored. In some cases, families were warned not to speak publicly or hold gatherings. This system was designed to break resistance at its core by targeting not just protesters, but their families. When a government monetizes death and criminalizes grief, it reveals a deeper truth. It no longer governs through legitimacy, only through fear and humiliation. The situation for the wounded was even darker than for the dead. According to doctors and witnesses, many injured protesters never reached hospitals at all. Security forces allegedly intercepted ambulances, removing wounded individuals and transferring them to undisclosed detention facilities instead of medical centers. WarLogicX highlights that this tactic serves two purposes at once. It hides real casualty numbers and turns medical care into a trap. There are multiple reports of unmarked vehicles, disguised to resemble ambulances, entering protest areas and pulling people from the crowd. Once inside, victims vanished. No hospital records, no legal charges, no contact with families. This was not emergency response. It was a cleansing operation. By removing the wounded, the regime erased evidence and spread terror. People began to fear seeking help more than bleeding in the streets. When a government weaponizes healthcare and violates the neutrality of ambulances, it crosses a red line recognized even in wartime. This was not policing. It was a strategy of disappearance. And every disappearance sent a message louder than gunfire. Survival itself could make you a target.